Well, I think we'll get started. It's five after, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll turn it over to Debbie for a few minutes, and she can tell you about herself. So, I'm Pam Hobson. I have have some different kinds of experience. I've worked at DADCAP now for about almost 4 years. But before that, I was a 4-H agent for almost 25 years in Richland County and did a lot of things with fairs and a lot of judging. And after that, I was a state specialist for ag and animal science on the state level. And with that, one of the things that I did that was on my position description was I was a liaison to the fairs as well as the Association of Fairs and to DATCAP. We kind of have a tripod there of people that we met together and were able to work together. So I was extensions person on that committee. And so I retired in 2018, I believe. And then I got a phone call after I was getting a little bit bored of staying home after being an extension agent. And I got a phone call or a text or something and wanted to know if I wanted to come and work part-time for DATCAP. So that's what I do. Some of the things that one of the predominant ones is fairs. I also work with the ginseng program and market orders, and a little bit with the Alice program once in a while. The other thing you might want to know about me was this training that we're giving tonight. I used to teach that before I worked at DATCAP as an extension agent. So this one, I kind of updated the PowerPoint and used the same one. So with that, Debbie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming on tonight. So I'm Debbie Jaguar. I'm the program manager of the county and district fairs. I was the one that made that phone call to Pam. Come on, come over here and work with me. But I also program manage market orders, cultivated ginseng, and I'm also the program manager for the Alice and Dairyland program. So in our bureau, we're called the Marketing and Outreach Program. So we've kind of got a nice little cluster going on. But I'm going to be the silent partner tonight. I'm just going to control the mechanics. I'm actually going to shut my computer camera off because I think it'll work a little bit better. And I'm going to let Pam take it away.
Okay, excellent. This one, a little bit about the judging experience. And as I told you, I used to work in 4-H youth development for almost 30 years before I retired. So when some of this says educational, it goes back to my extension days as being working in 4-H and youth development. But even though it says it's a vital part of the county fair, most people think of it as an educational thing for youth. But it's not only youth. Fairs are going out and trying to also promote agriculture and things at their fairs. They may have a ag tent to help people learn about agriculture. As we know, more and more people are no longer associated with agriculture. So that their education might be a little bit different. It might be geared more to agriculture, but there is education that goes on at the fair. And you as a judge can be very vitally important with that, especially when you're working with our youth. Our focus of judging is there's judging for the sake of judging, the exhibit and only the exhibit. And this typically probably happens more often in open class or in some of our fairs. For instance, I was the 4-H agent in Richland County, and that fair was after school started. So we didn't do some of the face-to-face or conference judging and some of those things that some other fairs might do. So it might have been the exhibit and the exhibit only in the youth part there too. During the junior youth show, we want them to gain some knowledge and some skills and get some, it's part of their development process as well. So a focus of judging is for you to help the youth as well, or not only just the youth. Sometimes in open class, you might have an audience, and that audience will probably pick your brain. They may not always agree with you, but be ready just to tell them and educate them and why you're placing something the way you are. Youth benefits of the judging experience. it helps them improve some of their project skills, especially for doing face-to-face judging. And it helps improve their project skills. They help recognize their efforts and accomplishments. And, if a kid's worked really, really hard on that project and they bring it to the fair and it's like, oh, maybe not the best exhibit at the fair, but at least it's their accomplishments. And that's what I like about sometimes, like with face-to-face judging, is you can find out if the exhibitor actually did the work himself and what they learned from it. And it helps them develop standards for future self-evaluation. When kids do something and you as the judge tell them, this is what I like about it, this is good, what could I do? This is what you maybe could do, help to do it better next time. And they can take that and then they can look at their project next year if it's a similar project and say, oh, I remember that judge told me this. Maybe I should try that. You encourage project continuation. And then you can always talk with them about what else could they learn. And the other thing that I always do too with that one is lots of times these older youth may be at a point where they've learned just about everything they can do in a project. So then I encourage them to do something else. And the thing that I encourage them to do is to work with the younger kids. And we know the whole old adage, the younger kids learn a lot from the older kids. They look up to them and they're all ready to say, oh, and you and I can stand up there and say the exact same things, but they're going to learn more from those younger kids or younger youth that are teaching them than us. So you can encourage them to do that. And it also helps those older kids too. They might not admit it, but if a younger kid is liking what they're saying and giving them a good compliment, and talking with those older youth are also gaining skills and stuff to work with kids as well. So it's a positive for both sides. Why do you want to be a judge? Well, some people do it just because they want the opportunity to work with people or youth or both. Sometimes, like me, after I retired, I judge a lot more now after I've retired. And the reason is because I still like going to fairs, I still like being out there, and I like especially working with the youth. So a lot of people are in the same boat, I think, that I am. Some of them want to give back to the fairs or youth or both. Maybe they had a great experience growing up and they want to give back to so that other people can experience those good things that happen to them. Sometimes it fulfills a personal need. Like sometimes you cultivate a hobby, but something from a hobby you might be able to give experience and give the exhibitors something that they can do what you've learned over the years. And financial reward, well, we don't always say that financial award because that was one of those that you don't be a judge to make a lot of money, because unless you're doing national judgings or something like that, it's not necessarily very lucrative. What do fairs look for in a judge? Usually you like to find someone that's working with people, that like to work with people or youth or both. Sometimes they want you to know your subject area. And, for instance, in a project area, a department like cultural arts, can you know everything perfectly? Probably not. You may be very good in drawing and painting, but you're not so good in cultural or in the macrame or in ceramics or something like that. So you want to know your subject area. And if you're asked to judge in something like cultural arts, you can always say to them, what do you have a lot of in your cultural arts? What kinds of exhibits there are? And if they say there's one fair that I can judge cultural arts, but I know this particular fair has lots of drawing and painting, and that's not my specialty. So I would probably say, I think you'd be better off getting someone else. Or if they say something that you're really like, and they might say, oh, but we only have 2 or 3 drawing and painting, you can probably get through that. So just be conscious of that and ask the fairs when when they ask you to judge if you have questions about what kind of things do you actually have at the judge. They want you to be friendly, approachable, and approachable is one of those where, especially if you're working with one that you might do face-to-face judging, because kids are going to be sitting in front of you, and you want to feel comfortable doing that, and just you feeling comfortable makes them feel comfortable as well. Ethical, that's one of those things where, particularly if you're judging some of our animal or livestock projects, maybe if you've sold an animal in that particular county and you're going to be the judge for it, maybe you don't accept that judging experience, because it may be the best dairy animal, it might be the best steer or barrow in the show, but if you sold that to that young person and they win the show, it makes it difficult for everybody. So you might want to think about that. Let's see. And the other thing that you might want to look out for is if you're judging, if somebody in your own county asks you to judge and you think that there's going to be relatives or people that are there that you're going to be judging, you might not want to accept that. So just be conscious of that if you're asked to judge somewhere like that. Be dependable. Late for judging, people don't, fairs get a little uptight. Just be prepared, and if you get a chance, give them a quick call and say, I'm going to be late. So just to be, where do fairs look for judges? There is a DATCP list, and that's the list you get on when you fill out your judge's application. And that judges list is in the kept in a SharePoint thing that the fairs can see and look at. A lot of it's by word of mouth. If you've judged in a county and that county fair, the next neighboring county fair or some other county fair says, we need a judge for clothing. Oh, I had this person and they're really good, so try them. And some contracts for judges or contacts from judges. And that's the one that I would suggest if you haven't been called. I know some people have done that. You might want to send them even almost like a letter, like a resume. This is what I can do. This is the departments that I judge. I'm very good, or my specialty is this. I'm willing to come to your fair. But us as the Department of Ag cannot suggest a judge to someone unless we give them a whole list. And if you need those emails or addresses, if you go on to the Wisconsin Association of Fairs, there's a list of the fairs there, and they have their phone numbers and their addresses there, as well as email. And email is probably one of the best ways at this point. The book has probably almost 3,000 judges in it. So if you're alphabetically, if your name starts with A, you might have a better chance. We also run it by counties to look for judges. So any questions about that, or has anybody been at a point where they haven't been asked to judge, and have you found a successful way to do that?
Pam, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
So somebody wants to know, when do counties typically start contacting judges?
Most fairs, I would say probably after the first of the year. A lot of them start. Some are a little bit slower. I've been contacted, I think, by about 5 fairs so far to see if I would want to come and judge. Some fairs do it more when spring gets here. So I would be looking at right now for sure into probably June. Hopefully most fairs have their judges. Maybe some of the late fairs that are September fairs or something like that may not have their judges yet, but start making those contacts right away, because like I said, a lot of judges or fairs are already contacting people to judge for them.
And then there's another question. Do I need to send in my application every year to DATCP, or is it just one time?
You just need to do it one time. There's going to be a new one now coming out with Ag 160. Those are the rules that kind of govern the fairs in Wisconsin. And with the new Ag 160, there's a part in there where you're going to have to redo your fair license every 5 years. But we haven't quite figured it out yet how we're going to do that. But we will be doing that, and we will get a notice. Oh, your 5 years is up. Would you please go in and renew your license? And so about in 2018, we sent out things for people to update their fair judges license. And so we're probably down to about 3,000 now, because we've added some over the last few years as well. The other thing that you need to know is if you do move, you get a new email address, you get a new phone number, any of those contact information stuff, just let us know and we will update that for you. Or if you want to add some department to judge, or if you want to one subtracted off of your license, we can do that for you too. So just keep us up to date on what you want and what you think you want from us, and we'll make sure that it gets adjusted on our DATCP list.
The one thing too that I was going to mention, fairs need to use the DATCP list. That's why you need to get on the DATCP list, because in order for fairs to qualify for state aid, they need to use a DATCP licensed judge.
Yep. And that's when you guys send in your application, and I send you back the little card and the thing that says what you're able to judge in Wisconsin. That number on there is your judge's number, and the fairs need that when you're judging for them. So either take the card with you, and a lot of them may have it before you go to judge as well. So just make sure you do that. And to the question on our next slide here says, how are judges contacted? It used to be mainly you always got contacted by a letter. But now with some of the new things that we have with email, 30 years ago, you probably got a letter. Now you probably get an email or a phone call, because those are some of the things that the fairs can see that are in that DATCP list. And fairs try to do it the earlier, I put down there, the earlier the better, because I know last year, 3 fairs contacted me for the same day. And so that's why a lot of fairs are starting now, or even have started in January, to make sure that they get their judges.
Yeah, I think so. Like in one of our peak weeks of the fairs, we have 14 fairs that all happen in the same week.
Yep. And then after, I see someone wrote in there that they gotten emails and phone calls. And then usually after that initial contact, they send you back a letter, usually in the mail, and that letter in the mail contains your contract. Okay, this next one, it says what judges should receive in a fair request. And this is basically the contract you'll probably get in the mail after you've had that initial contact with either an email or an email or a phone call. Now we've got at least Dane County now here as well, that they're doing actually signing the contract to judge at their fair online as well. So I think that more fairs will probably continue and start to do that. So just be aware, you might not get a letter, but you might be followed up with an email to sign your contract as well. Some of those things in those contracts is, of course, the name of the fair, the location, and the phone number. Now, the location, you might think, well, don't we know where all the fairs are? No. A lot of the fairgrounds may be, you might think, oh, it's by the county seat. Well, they're not all in the county seat. And so you need to know where you're going, and hopefully an address as well. Even if it is in the county seat, they're usually not always easy to find. Also, the date, that's important, because some people, depending on what you're judging, or it may not be during the fair. There may be some off fair dates, or they call them split fair dates. And those split fair dates are because maybe it's the clothing review or sometimes the dog show. That they don't have any place to do the dog show. When I was in Richland County, the Horse Project did theirs before the fair because they needed to be able to qualify for the State 4-H Horse Expo, and they couldn't do it because the Horse Expo was the next weekend after our fair. So we held that early. So just make sure that you know what the date is, that you're supposed to be there, and of course the time. That's pretty self-explanatory. Well, you will be judging. Now, maybe if you're doing one of the animal projects, it may be only one thing. But if you get into some of the things in the other buildings, maybe you're judging 3 or 4 different departments. So make sure you feel comfortable with what you're being asked to judge.
I'm going to just mention one thing about that too. You should also make sure you know if it's open class, senior class, or junior class, because you might feel more comfortable judging junior foods versus open class foods, right? So just make sure you know what class you're going to be in as well.
Yeah, when we talk about the differences between open and junior show, it sometimes becomes very evident why you need to know which ones are open and which ones are junior, and how you're going to also judge those classes. Is it going to be just straight judging? Is it going to be face to face? If you don't feel comfortable talking with young people, maybe you don't want to do that. So make sure you also know those kinds of things too. As far as pay rate, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later and say some of the different types of ways that people get paid for fairs. But if they have some special expectations for you, you might want to make sure that those are in there. If they've said to you on the phone, we expect you to, if you're judging the beef show, we expect you to pick who's going to be in the meat animal sale. Some judges say, fine, I can do that. Others are like, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that and I won't accept the position. And respond by the deadline. There's usually a deadline in there when you need to respond and sign your contract and send it back. And we had, I think it was Candy. Did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Is there a handbook that we get for the things that we're judging, so we know what a blue ribbon would look like, or if they have what they have on their project is really supposed to be in there, and vice versa? And then the other one is I have that whole crafty thing on my license, but what if they have one person in one category and it's not on my list? Can I still judge it or not?
Yeah, you can still judge it. If you feel more comfortable and you want to add that later to your judge's card, you can do that by just letting us know. And your other question about, give me a hint again now.
Criteria.
Oh, criteria.
What's the criteria, I guess.
Yeah, well, that would be mostly the premium book. And each fair should either send you a copy of their premium book. Most times now it's probably going to come electronically, or if they send it to you in paper form, it's probably going to be the departments that you're going to judge. And in there, we'll give some specifics. Maybe a fair, if you're judging posters, may say they can only be, 14 by 24 or whatever the thing is. And if you're not sure how to do that, talk to your superintendent. Do I put them down one place? If it's an open class, do they get disqualified? Some of those kinds of things too. So just ask your fair about that. If it's an animal project, for instance, rabbits, there's actually books that say these are the standards for the different rabbit breeds. And so you as a judge, if you're judging something like rabbits or dogs and some of those kinds of things, you probably already know that, and you will bring that with you if you want to. There's also for like rabbits, they can only be for certain ones, maybe up to 5 pounds or something. Most fairs will have the scales. Some judges prefer to bring their own scales. And if you have a question like something like that, don't be afraid to reach out to the fair and ask those questions.
Thanks. I've never done any judging before. I got my thing last year, my certification last year, and I didn't judge. So I'm new to this and still want to know what's going on. Yeah,
and I would suggest another thing that you can do, if you know another judge that's going to judge at your county fair, or go to the county fair and talk to a judge in the department that you would like to judge and say, hey, can I judge along with you, and can you give me some pointers? That's also helpful for you, but then also the fair gets, oh, there is somebody else out here that we might be able to get if Johnny can't come next year or something like that. So that's another way to kind of promote yourself as well to fairs.
Okay, thanks.
All right, some expectations of judges, be on time, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes I even like to be a little early. You can kind of get your bearings, and this is where I'm going to be judging. You meet the superintendents and the clerks and some of those, and get a little bit of say, oh, this is what's going to happen today. Be ready to judge when it's time to judge. Work with the superintendents and clerks. They're sometimes your best resource, because especially if there's one of those special rules in that county, or it's the poster's supposed to be this size and it's not, ask them, what do I do with it? And work with them. Usually the superintendent is the one that knows the most about the things, and the clerks are the ones that help you. They write down the placings and some of those kinds of things. They want you to be able to answer questions. Sometimes you'll go to a fair and there's nobody but you and the superintendent and maybe a clerk, and you go through it and no one asks you a question. And if they ask you a question, try to answer it. And if something happens, they say, but this is what the fair book said. It's okay to admit you're wrong. They'll appreciate you a whole lot more. And say, hey, I just got this book today and I missed that. And so admit that you maybe made a mistake as well. And that happens sometimes. Provide written comments. Some fairs that don't do face-to-face judging or don't have the people there, they want you to write comments. Now, if it's a big fair, it's really hard, but you can also ask those clerks to help you. The things that I put comments on, if there's something that looks like I judged it wrong or something like that, I may put a thing on the back. That poster was too big, so it went down to, a third place or whatever it might be. So their written comments, again, it depends on how many things are there. Special awards. There's almost 75 fairs in the state of Wisconsin. There's probably 75 different ways of doing special awards. So this is one of those things I ask before I start judging. Do you have special awards? Yes. What's the criteria for those special awards? Maybe we give something to the top 10%, or some of maybe only like in our champion and reserve, and maybe we have a supreme champion or something like that. So those special awards, ask before you start judging, because then you know what you're looking for as you judge too. And maybe some of those departments, you might say, oh, this one might be, let's put this aside as a possible winner of a merit award or something. And then later on, as the day goes on, you find out, oh, no, that one just doesn't fit in, but you at least have it set aside. Then it says sign affidavits or other paperwork. This is really important that you sign affidavits, and it says affidavit or affidavits. If you're judging more than one department, some fairs will have an affidavit for you to sign, and you also need to put on your judge's number on that. They have one for each department. They don't have to do that. If, in fact, it's better for us and it's better for them because they don't have to upload so many judges' affidavits into SharePoint. If you have everything, say you judge 5 of 5 departments and they only have 4 on there, you might want to say, oh, I also judged dogs because somebody wasn't here today, or I judged one or two little things. So make sure you do that, and make sure you sign that, because it's important for the fairs to get their state aid to have those affidavits signed.
Pam, I wanted us to all mention one thing. I think it's kind of a given, but we would expect that judges have knowledge of their department, right? That you've kept up with the times, and you've kept up with the trends, and you've kept up with what's happening in the world with that particular department.
Okay, in this next slide, we're going to talk about some potential issues. And if there's some experienced judges on here that have some things to add to this, please chime in as well. Sometimes superintendents, sometimes they just are a little overzealous. Maybe they want to tell you how to judge, and your philosophy and theirs may not come together just right. And maybe they want to tell you who should win. Well, you know, be courteous, be nice, but just be aware that sometimes that can be an issue. Facilities, many of our fairs are small. It's in the middle of the summer, it's hot, and maybe all they have is a tin building to to judge in. You know, if you can have a fan or something like that to help you. And most fairs don't have air conditioning, so just be aware of that. If you can find some way to get some air movement, that's always good. Parents can be an issue sometimes, especially when you're doing face-to-face judging. And I think a lot about with our younger members with Clover Buds or exploring members that are doing face-to-face with a judge. And parents want to get in there and tell them. And, you know, sometimes I've told parents, you know, I just want to talk to Melissa here. Why don't you go over and have a seat? Be nice about it, but sometimes parents can get in the way. There's also incomplete judging area set up. Maybe you don't have what you need. Ask them for it, or sometimes we just have to be flexible as well. And just be aware of things in the surroundings. Sometimes somebody may come up behind you and scare you or something because you're out in the middle or something like that. So, you know, there's different things that can do that. And I think we had someone that wanted to ask a question.
That was me.
Okay.
All right. Now face-to-face should be with the kid, right? What if the kid has another commitment and so the parent comes? Can that happen?
Again, that's one of those things that you would discuss with the superintendent. Usually they already have rules about how they handle that.
Okay.
Yep, and just go with the fair.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Our judges' compensation, there's a lot of various ways that fairs will compensate their judges. Sometimes it's per hour. You go and they're going to pay you so much per hour. I don't know if they're going up anymore, but it's usually not. I know I judge a lot of them at $10 an hour or less. Mostly, I think about the lowest I've seen lately is $10 an hour. There's a flat rate. They'll say, I'm going to pay you $100 and you come and judge. Sometimes there's hours plus mileage. Sometimes it's a flat rate for appearing. And then some fairs, you say, we're going to give you $50 for coming, and then we're going to pay you another $10 for every hour that you're there. And then sometimes there's a flat rate plus expenses. There may be others as well. Which one's best? Only you can answer that question. Some fairs actually ask you to do a W-2, and of course you have to put that in because they will be turning that in.
Kim, I was also just going to mention I've had some judges that have called me before saying, what's DACAP say? What's the DACAP rule? There is no DACAP rule. 74 fairs pay 74 different ways and 74 different prices. So,
okay, if we move on to the next one, it's open versus junior class. What's the difference? Most youth or adults that exhibit in open class, they exhibit talents. They compete against others with the same talent. Monetary, sometimes they want to get the money from the premiums, or maybe there's a bonus if you win at some fairs or something like that, or reputation. I always see in open class sometimes, especially in the non-livestock things, it's a reputation. Well, it's really usually fun and friendly competition that they enjoy, and sometimes it's improving their skills as well. The one thing that I've come across that is a little bit difficult for me, and this is one of those things that you have to talk to the fair about. It's if there is a youth in open class, and for instance, maybe in drawing and painting or something like that, there's a drawing from it's obviously a 5-year-old, which anybody can enter an open class, and it's a stick figure, versus some other ones that maybe there's only 2 in the class and there's another one that's, a fantastic portrait of someone that someone has drawn. What do you do? Now, one of the things that's different in open class versus junior is in open class, you only give out 4 places, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to talk about this a little more, but you don't have to do that. So do I not give that out because a stick one does not measure up to maybe the standard in open class, or do I give them something just because they entered? It's one of those things you have to talk with the fairs. Some fairs say, well, we want to encourage more people to exhibit, so you have to give them something. And in open class, I'm not sure. I mean, I think we all have our own opinions. So if you're judging open class, be aware that could happen to you as well. Why youth exhibit in junior class, it's somewhat more educational. They can demonstrate that they've learned some skills. There's public recognition of an accomplished goal, and it's friendly peer competition. Sometimes it's fun to see those kids come in and they're this little fun competition against each other. The other thing that I have seen with the friendly peer competition is that's hard to judge sometimes. Maybe a 4-H club has gotten together in a project meeting and they all made the same thing. And so you have 12 or 15 of the same thing exactly. How do you distinguish between them? And just do the best you can. And I think we had someone made a comment that you asked them to join a club or something like that. And in this one particular fair that this happened to me, I said, too, why don't they? Well, they don't want to be in 4-H anymore. So, and I don't know the reason why or why not. And I think sometimes, too, they've been able to, and generally in open class, the premiums might be higher than junior class. So, they may get more money by participating in that one. And if you get a blue ribbon just because you're the only one in the class, maybe that's why as well. Types of judging. On this one in open class where it says face-to-face, move that over to the junior class. Somehow that one got moved. So open class is regular judging. If you've got, no matter if you've got 5, yeah, do you want to go back? Yeah, there you go. No matter if you have 1, 10, or 20 in the class, if there's 20 in the class, you give out 1 first place, 1 second place, 1 third place, and 1 fourth place, and the rest of them don't get placed. The problem comes in again sometimes if there's 2 in the class and you think, oh man, these are open class, and maybe the flowers that you're judging are all wilted and they don't look like first place. You do not have to give one of them the blue ribbon or the first place and one the second place. You can give third and fourth, or you don't have to give anything in those classes. But if you don't give anything, that might be one of the things you say to the superintendent. I'm not giving anybody anything in this class. If somebody asks, I didn't believe it was the quality that it needed to be an open class. Or you might write that on the back of the entry tag. You may or may not have an audience here. It could be exhibitors, it could be the public. Sometimes you get these, I'll just say little old ladies that are showing their baking, or they're showing their flowers and their house plants, and they get very into some competition here. And so you can have a little fun with them and do that as well. But they can ask you some questions, and you better be ready for that sometimes. And you can kind of figure out your audience as you're judging on how they are at. For junior class, there's conference judging. And that's having a group that's within that lot come together and you talk with them, and we'll go through that a little bit more. There's Danish judging, and Danish is that every one of your youth gets placed in there, and we're going to talk about the Danish judging system because it's not that easy to figure out. And face-to-face is just what it says. You'll actually have the youth coming up to you, and you'll be judging them one-on-one. And we're going to explain all those a little bit more. So Danish judging, we're going to talk about when it's used, and then I'm going to have Debbie bring up the chart so we can look at it. This one, Danish judging, is used in all of our youth exhibits. And again, everybody gets a placing. Now, some fairs may have a thing that someone gets disqualified, but if it's because they're late, then the fair itself should have disqualified them before you, and you shouldn't even see it. Don't let them let you be the bad guy, I guess is what if they have a rule and they want it to be enforced because somebody was late, and some fairs may say, well, if they were going to get a blue ribbon, they will get a red ribbon. But be aware that before you start judging what the criteria is, and ask, if there's somebody, they usually, superintendents will say, this is Johnny's project. Johnny was late and he needs to be placed down one. Okay, here's the Danish chart. And I know some of you, it was attached with your email, and others it wasn't. Again, this one, if you want a copy of this, most fairs will, when you go to Judge Junior, will have a copy of it there. Most of them, it's like 1/4 of them are going to be blues, 1/4 is going to be seconds, thirds, and fourths. It's like 1/4, 1/4. So the smaller numbers, like 4, it's going to be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. They're very easy to do. But if it gets into an odd number like 23, sometimes you need to look at the chart. So either take one with you, or like I said, most fairs have it there. If you look at the top, let's look at the first one. That's really easy. When it comes up to only one in the class, you can basically give it anything you want, a 1, 2, 3, or 4 place. When it comes to, let's look at, say, let me see, what's a good one here? Say 7th place. The maximum you can give is 2 first place. And if you give 2 first place, then the next one, it doesn't mean you can give then 4 second places. It means if you've already used 2 of them up in your first placing, then you can have 2 more for your second places. But if you only gave them 1 blue in that class, then you could give 3. It's kind of what it adds up to. It's not how many you can give when you get to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And then if you look at 3rd place and 7th, you can give up to 6. And if you haven't given any first place, or you haven't given any second place, then you could give 6 third places. But if you give 6 third places, you have to give someone a 4th place, because in 7th, to be a part of the Danish system and do it correctly, you have to give at least one of the exhibitors a 4th place ribbon. If you go to 12, it's 3. That's an easy one. 3, 6, 9, 12, because it's divisible by 4. And again, it adds up. If you only gave 1 in that 12th place, if you only gave 1 first place ribbon, then you could give 5. It adds up to 6 to 2nd place. When it comes up to only 1 in the class, you can basically give it anything you want, a 1, 2, 3, or 4 place. When it comes to, let's look at, say, let me see, what's a good one here? Say 7th place. The maximum you can give is 2 first place. And if you give 2 first place, then the next one, it doesn't mean you can give then 4 second places. It means if you've already used 2 of them up in your first placing, then you can have 2 more for your second places. But if you only gave them 1 blue in that class, then you could give 3. It's kind of what it adds up to. It's not how many you can give when you get to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And then if you look at 3rd place and 7th, you can give up to 6. And if you haven't given any first place, or you haven't given any second place, then you could give 6 third places. But if you give 6 third places, you have to give someone a 4th place, because in 7th, to be a part of the Danish system and do it correctly, you have to give at least one of the exhibitors a 4th place ribbon. If you go to 12, it's 3. That's an easy one. 3, 6, 9, 12, because it's divisible by 4. And again, it adds up. If you only gave one in that 12th place, if you only gave one 1st place ribbon, then you could give 5. It adds up to 6 to 2nd place. And the one thing I have found too is, if you don't understand the Danish system, lots of times if you ask the superintendent, they don't either. So kind of, if you have a handle on it, that's good. And if you don't, give me a call or something. I can try to explain it to you as well, or ask another judge that's there has a lot of experience in Danish judging. All right. Now if we go back to the PowerPoint.
Yep, it says sometimes the judge will ask if they can give more than what is on the Danish, right? If you can only give 2 blues, but you really want to give 3 blues.
Yeah, well, you're not supposed to do that. And you shouldn't really do it. They're hiring you to be the authority here. And it's them getting their state aids. And sometimes it says rarity. Yeah, once in a while you can say, I mean, if you get in one of those classes where 3 different exhibitors have done the same project and they're all really good, and you can't find anything to divide them, you can say, okay, but you need to initial the judge's sheet as well.
I've been in a fair office where a judge did the Danish system wrong, and the fair office will not be happy with you as a judge if you do it wrong.
Yes.
So that is a consideration.
Yes, definitely. I heard from some fair telling me that they had hired a judge was one of the animal projects, and they refused to do Danish system because at state fair they don't have to do that. And it's like, then the fair needs to explain to those judges that yes, this you do have to do this, and this is why, with the state aid and stuff. You can also explain to them that state fair is different. State fair does not get any state aid, so they can do their ribbons and give whatever they want for premiums that other fairs can't, because they don't get any state aid.
I think it's also important to kind of note too, like why do we do Danish in junior, right? So that everybody that enters actually gets a placing or gets a ribbon. And we're not going to give out 14 blue ribbons, right? So it helps us to make those determinations or be able to do those levels. So, and you're absolutely right. Your fair will not be happy if you gave out all blues and reds and went over the numbers, and you kind of got it botched up a little bit. Here is another comment in here. So is the chart saying you can give up to that number, but not more than? So her example is with 10 exhibits, you can give up to 2 first place, but not more, up to 5 seconds, but not more. I'm going to just pop the chart back up again.
Okay, and what you're saying, you're right in the part where you can't give more than 2 firsts, but it doesn't mean that you can give 5 seconds either. What it means is the first places, if you gave those 2 first places out, then the maximum you could give is 3 second places, because it adds up the 2 that you already gave in first place and the 5 that we did in the other one. Youth comment considerations. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Be positive. No matter what the project is like, there's something positive about it. And when you're going to give some comments or some ways to help them, just do it constructively. Be non-judgmental. Encouraging is always really important, and age appropriate. Maybe what a 9-year-old can do is different expectations than what someone that's in high school should do. The other thing I kind of talk about, especially when I'm doing face-to-face judging with kids, is the sandwich effect. Start off with something that's positive, followed by maybe one of those constructive things. You know, this cookie here, it could have been a little better. You might have judged a little higher if they had all been the same size, or something like that, and then follow it up with something positive again. So it's kind of like a sandwich there. All right, let's move on to our adult ones comments. This one you can be more direct because they're actually there. They're supposed to be already knowing what the standards are. And if something isn't up to par, it's okay. Be constructive, be good, nice about it. It's more factual based. Youth, sometimes we don't always get into details because age appropriate, they may not be able to do that, where as an adult they should be. And just be confident when you're giving reasons or telling people what you're thinking. Many of the things, when you get to open class, you're judging it on a standard, especially in some of our projects. So just think about that as well. Some of our types of judging. The first one is group or conference judging. What you're doing is judging and placing an entire class all at one time. And if there's, say, carrots, and there are 6 kids entered in that particular class or lot, they would come all at one time, and you would talk to them. You may ask them questions. You would do some things like that, and you're going to place the class, and lots of times you're going to be using the Danish system. Exhibitors are present and hear your comments, and they're probably going to ask you questions as well. Now, one of the things I like to do with conference judging, this is for older youth. If they're young first-year members, or even our younger youth that might be Clover Buds or something like that, I wouldn't do this. But if they're older kids, I use this technique of having them help me judge the class. You can say, okay, if you were the judge, what would you look for? And you can ask each one of them, and sometimes they're brutally honest. Well, I didn't do very well. And then you can also have them talk with each other. Well, James over here, he did a really good project. What did you do, James, to get there? And he may give them some of the other ones and give them some of those comments or some ways that they could make theirs better as well. The next slide is some of the pros are, you do see the whole class at once with the kids being there as well. Can place Danish as you compare it to each exhibit against the rest. So sometimes it's a little easier to judge than trying to judge on looking, oh, here's the standard and how do I judge that? You can use teaching. You can teach the group like I was talking about before. You can easily point out good and not so good aspects of the project. So those are some of the pros. Some of the cons, not all judges are comfortable giving reasons. If you're judging an animal project, you probably will need to give reasons. Almost all the animal ones have the expectation that you will get up on the mic and explain why you placed the class the way you did. Not so much in some of the other areas. You don't learn nearly as much about the exhibitor or their exhibit because you're not doing a one-on-one. Sometimes this is hard to schedule. And sometimes not all the exhibitors are present. And I know we had a question earlier, what do you do if the kid doesn't show up? Or can mom and dad do it? That's when you ask the superintendent. Ask that superintendent if you know that day that you're going to do some conference judging. What if one of the youth doesn't get here? Do they get put down a place? Well, some fairs may say, oh, it's okay. They've already contacted us and they're showing something else at the time. Can't be here, so it's okay. You just judge it as if they were here. Some may say, well, if they couldn't make it, it's down one. Some may say that a parent can show it for them, but most fairs, instead of having a parent or an adult show it for them, they will ask another youth to show it for them. Okay, face-to-face. And this is one of those one-on-one things. You're going to be talking with the exhibitor one-on-one. It's kind of a semi-private conversation with the exhibitor. to evaluate their work and place their exhibit compared to a standard. One of the things that have changed with the Ag 160 rules, it used to be some fairs were a little bit, they understand this is probably the most educational part of doing face-to-face is one of the judging techniques. It's the most educational, but it also sometimes costs them money because you can't necessarily do the Danish system with it. But with the new Ag 160 laws, rules, you can do face-to-face and still get your total premiums, even if it doesn't go with Danish on that. Then sometimes you get questions, well, do I give all blues? I would say no. I would say probably the majority of us judges will give out a lot of blues and reds when we're doing face-to-face, but it also depends on what that particular individual tells you. If an individual tells me outright and they're 15 years old that I didn't do the project, well, even though matter how good the project is, I'm probably not going to give them a blue ribbon. It's probably going to be a white or pink, depending on what else they tell me. So those are some of the things you need to take in consideration when you're judging face-to-face. And on the next slide, we talk about the pros. You get to meet and learn about the exhibitors, and that's always fun for a lot of us that we like to talk with the youth. You find out what they know or what they don't know. How much help did they have with the project? And some judges will say, well, they shouldn't have any help. Well, if it's a 9-year-old or a first-year member and they're in a project, they probably need some help. And that's a good thing, too, because whoever's helping them is probably some adult or older youth. And those kind of interactions are good as well. So keep that in mind as well. Resources used, you might ask some of those questions. You kind of judge against a standard. It's easy to schedule with a block of time. Say, okay, at 3 o'clock today, the fair says we're going to judge our cultural art exhibits, and everybody comes and you get in a line, you get a number, and as the judge gets ready, gets one done, they move on to the next one. There's, again, this is the part I like, is high educational impact. And when it says experiential learning cycle, basically what that is, you do the project, you evaluate it, and you talk with somebody, you think about what you could do better and for next time, and then you repeat it and do it next time, and incorporating some of those things that you learned from the judge or from doing it the first time. Some of the cons are you give more of those blue and red ribbons. It does take more time and it takes more energy as far as the superintendents and you as a judge too. If you have a lot of exhibits in that or exhibitors that you need to talk to, by the end you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I don't remember what question I asked this one because I've asked so many kids different things. So it does take, and if you need a break, don't be afraid to ask your superintendent. It does take some organization, and you get those impatient parents. Why isn't my kid, or why isn't my kid first, and all those kinds of things. So those are some of the cons. Goals. My goal is always to create blue ribbon kids. You know, and I always have said in my career, working with 4-H Youth Development, that we're about creating blue ribbon kids. And if they get that purple ribbon or something, that's just a bonus. But it's all the things that they learn that make it a blue ribbon youth. And this is, this can be a real powerful interaction between you as the judge that's an adult and these youth. And you want to be able to create a sense of safety and structure so that these kids feel like they can talk with you and those kinds of things. Make sure that they are proud and accountability that comes along with learning the skills. Encourages making mastered skills and turning into meaningful contributions. It furthers their sense of worth. Deepening sense of belonging. Kids belong to something. They feel like they're a part of the fair and those kinds of things. They can enjoy life and realize success. You know, I think when some of us come back to judge, some of it is because we've had a good experience at the fair and some of those kinds of things. And that's why we want to be a judge. We want to come back and give back to that fair. And we just want these kids to embrace some of those values that our fairs have or our communities have, and be able to be a role in that community. And I think many times if a youth has had a great experience at the fair or something, they might come back and be superintendents, or they want to do something and volunteer at the fair. So we just want to have kids, like I said, let's develop these blue ribbon kids. And if they get a purple ribbon or that merit award, that's just a bonus. Some of our next steps, again, if you have your judge's card and you need it updated, whether it be an address or what departments you want to judge, or some other information that needs, just email me and I can do that. If it's changing, adding a new department and it's going to change your card, I'll send you a new card. So and you can just do that as an email. You don't have to redo your whole application. We can do it very quickly. If you're not licensed, you need to get licensed before July 1st. So I would send that in right away and we can get it done. And I'm going to be sending the fairs a new judges list, or putting it up in SharePoint as soon as I get a couple minutes here and get that done. So then I will put out another one after the first part of July, like the 5th or 6th of July. And that was the only ones that they can use for this year. There might be future trainings, and encourage others to become judges. If you're at a fair and you're judging and the superintendent is asking questions and you think that they may be good judges, suggest to them, why don't you become a judge? Because that helps us out. We need the young judges. I see when I'm going through and licensing people, lots of times we get these young judges that are in our livestock or dairy or some of our animal projects because they've been on college or 4-H judging teams or FFA judging teams, and they know how to give reasons, and they know how to judge carcasses, or they know how to judge an animal. And with that, they make great, and again, our younger youth will look up to these, but especially up in the non-animal or non-livestock projects, we need some younger people. Well, let's see, what is the youngest a judge can be? I don't think we have any criteria on how young the judge needs to be, but I would say, out of the junior fair age. So I would say at least 19 to 20 before you do that. And it kind of depends, again, on what you want to judge as well. If we could pull up our last slide, it's just how you can contact us. You can email me, and it's kind of off there, but it's pamela.hobson@wisconsin.gov. And a lot of people just, because I go by Pam, just don't put pam.hobson because it'll go back to you. So make sure it's Pamela. And the same address that you signed up and put your, when you signed up for this webinar and sent us your name and address and your email and that kind of stuff, you can always ask questions in there too. Thank you, Debbie, for reminding me of that. Let's see, we got another one in here. Where do we get the judge's application? Either you can email us and we can do it, send it to you, or send you the link. But if you go into Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and there's a little search thing, search fairs, and there's an application on there. If nothing else, again, thank you for participating, and hopefully we'll see you, and hopefully you'll be judging for some fair real soon.